Before I begin, I have this important message. My mom is really grateful to Andy Pierce because he films the sermons each Sunday and puts them online so she can watch her firstborn son every Sunday. So, hi Mom. Happy Mother's Day. Now Mom, I don't want you to worry. I got this divot in my forehead. It's because I wasn't paying attention. You know how you always told me to focus on one thing at a time. I whacked it really hard on the car door because I was doing too much. I should have listened to you. And by the way, back in 1968, when somebody ate all the cookies before company and nobody would admit it, it was me. Sorry. Love ya. And a happy Mother's Day to all mothers here today and everywhere. All right, now to business. In my line of work, I cannot ignore death. And I think that's a good thing. Experiencing funerals on a regular basis might be hard, but it also makes you think about what's really important in life. And that's a good thing. Living life with an awareness of its end point makes life richer and sweeter. When my beloved wife was diagnosed with cancer over 5 years ago, it put a lot of stuff in perspective, and her thus far successful treatment has made everything sweeter. Now, if I get ticked off by the small stuff, when I remember that I've still got Paula, getting ticked off seems really silly. You know, when you go to a funeral, you're there to offer care and support to those who are in grief. But going to a funeral is also good for your own soul. Makes you remember what is really important in life. Now, in last week's exciting sermon episode, I talked about the Apostle Peter and how he so often messes up. Well, isn't it nice today to see Peter shine in this story from the Acts of the Apostles, which takes place after the resurrection of Christ. Peter actually raises someone from the dead, like Jesus did. So at least in that moment, the Spirit of Jesus is powerfully working in and through Peter. Now, I think the story in the Acts of the Apostles is told partly to remind us that the resurrection is still our hope. The resurrection was not just a one-time deal on that first Easter morning. The resurrection is an ongoing reality. But let me put the miracle stuff aside for a couple of minutes. This story about Dorcas or Tabitha in the book of Acts always tugs at my heart a little bit. You see, when Peter arrives, Tabitha's grieving friends show him all the craft work she used to do before she died. And they told him about how she was so kind and she did so many good things for other people. Her tearful friends were full of grief. Well, haven't we all experienced that many, many times? I can't count the number of funerals I have done where people tell sweet stories about this person that we've lost, and they remember that person with such love. I remember one funeral I did here at St. Mark's a few years ago. It was for a non-church member. By coincidence, her name was Tabitha. Now, the connection was that she lived upstairs in a group home right above the group home my daughter lives in. So they asked me if I could do the service. During the service, there was a time for people to stand up and talk about Tabitha. Her brother got up. He talked about how sweet Tabitha always was in spite of her disability. He talked about how close he felt to her when they were little kids. And then he confessed that he had not been in touch with her for a couple of years. He said there were reasons. There was a lot going on in his life with his children and with job turmoil he was experiencing. But then he said, that's no excuse. He went on to say this: connect with the people you love. Don't wait to visit the person you haven't seen in a while. That person you care about, but have not been in touch with. And the congregation went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I think this was maybe the most honest thing a family member ever said during a funeral service. So I pass it on to you and remind you to take it to heart. Life is short, and we don't have too much time to gladden the hearts of those with whom we journey along the way. If I have learned something from doing hundreds of funerals, it is that we do need to connect with the people we love all the time. Don't delay. Don't take time for granted. Life is short. Now, what do you want them to say at your funeral? 3 guys were talking about that. One guy says, I hope they say that I was a good man who took care of his family and served his community and his country. Second guy says, I hope they tell people that I was an honest person and that I was kind. Third guy says, I hope they say, look at the casket, he's moving. What do you want people to say at your funeral? At mine, I really would not mind if people said, he was amazingly tall and totally glamorous. That's not going to happen. But I really do hope people will say, he was kind. He was a good listener. He was compassionate. That's the way I want to live. And that's the way I want to die. And that's what I hope people will say about me and about you. But that thing about look at the casket, he's moving, that'd be okay too.